So I'm very pleased to introduce to you Adrian Daffern. Adrian studied at the University of Durham and Oxford, and after his ordination served in quite a few different places. I'm just going to list a few of them. He was a curate in Lichfield, hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly, a team vicar in Stafford, a vicar in Walsall, and a canon at Coventry Cathedral. He then spent about 8 years or so in the Diocese of Oxford, after which he came to Cambridge Great St. Mary's Church. Adrian's not just a canon of that church, but he's also a fellow of the Royal College of Organists. And of course, more importantly in this context, he's a fellow of Lucy Cavendish College. Tonight, he will speak about the new normal. Now, if I told you that about 8 weeks ago, you wouldn't have had a clue what it's all about. It's still a bit of a surprise, but you have a bit more of an idea. And in the context of our Lucy in Lockdown series, of course, it's very appropriate as a title. Now, he is a much better speaker than I am. So without any further ado, I will just hand the floor to you now, Adrian. And welcome and thank you for giving a talk here.
Well, thank you, Henriette, so much for that introduction. I don't agree for a moment that I'm a better speaker than you, but it's, goodness me, how do you follow all of that? Well, let's see how we go. I am a bit worried, and I should declare this to everybody who's been so kind to tune in on probably the loveliest evening of the year so far, when you could all be out sunning yourselves in the garden. The advertising suggested that I was going to offer you wisdom and insight as we think about what we might mean in a post-lockdown context of living, which has been dubbed, for good or ill, the new normal. Now, I don't know about you, but as I've given thought to what I would say this evening over the last week or so, I think whatever wisdom and insight I might have had have become mired in a morass of facts and figures, opposing beliefs about science, or perhaps I should say the science, as science now seems to take the definite article in these pandemical days, views about politics, economics, whether or not you should send your children to school, public transport, what we can and can't do, masks, do we wear them or not? Should we be 2 meters away, 1 meter away, or 3 meters away, as someone suggested today? Wisdom and insight, where are they to be found in the middle of all of this? Well, in a blog piece for the college a few weeks ago, I suggested, and I think I'm right, that the new normal is a phrase which originates in the United States. It was coined by economists in the context of the financial crisis at the end of the last decade. And in broad terms, it refers to the previously abnormal becoming normal, becoming commonplace. But it is a little more nuanced than that, and I want to share with you a short extract of a key lecture that was given at the time. The distinguished economist and Queen's alum, Mohammed El-Erian, gave the Per Jacobson lecture in Washington, D.C. on October the 10th in 2010. And the lecture was called Navigating the New Normal in Industrial Countries. And this was just at the time that the phrase, the new normal, was being heard for the first time, 10 years ago. And in that lecture, El-Erian defined the twin characteristics of the new normal as an uneven journey and a new destination. The twin characteristics of the new normal, an uneven journey and a new destination. And he said this: our use of the term, the new normal, was an attempt to move the discussion beyond the notion that the crisis was a mere flesh wound, easily healed with time. Instead, the crisis cut to the bone. It was the inevitable result of an extraordinary period which was anything but normal. So let's remember, he's talking about the financial crash of 2008. So where are we now? Well, surely we're in the anything but normal phase, the uneven journey bit. And I think part of the bumpiness of the journey is how we even manage the concept of the new normal. In the Times last week, Giles Coren was on typically sarcastic and acerbic form. His column began, "Okay, you know what? The next person who says the new normal, I'm going to find you and I'm going to kill you. I don't care if you're doing some boring report from a northern care home on Channel 4 News, or writing a jolly newspaper feature about lockdown cocktails," it's a nice thought, "or just talking to some other loser in the socially distanced queue at the yeast counter of your local organic self-congratulatory bread-making hub, I'm going to find you and I'm going to eradicate you. Because the new normal doesn't mean anything. The world changes every second of every day and always has, and normal is always relative." Now, of course, he's right. Not the bit about homicide at the yeast counter, obviously, but certainly the stuff about the word normal. Normal is just not a very good word, is it? The Cambridge English Dictionary fails to make the definition sound even remotely exciting. And I guess that's the point. You can almost hear the bored nasal tone of the lexicographer. Normal, ordinary, or usual is what it says, the same as would be expected. But I was struck by some of the examples of usage that the Cambridge English Dictionary then provided beneath the definition, one or two of which are alarmingly relevant for our times, such as, "It's normal for couples to argue now and then. They were selling the goods at half the normal cost." I don't think that's right. "His temperature was above normal." And this next one, I fear, is definitely going to prove more challenging. "Things are back to normal now that we've paid off all our debts." Yeah, right, as they say. I think the important thing here is not to confuse the essence of who we are as human beings with the practice of what we do day to day. What I mean is this: many of my days are quite normal in the dictionary definition of the word. Ordinary things happen, the usual things take place. But the person who is living this normal, i.e. me, is not even remotely normal, which is not to say I'm especially abnormal, it's to say that I am unique. And so are you. What's normal about me or you? Who is to say what is normal or not? I'm not a great one for internet memes, and this one is a little bit cheesy perhaps, but even so I was moved when I read it. It says, "The day you were born was the day God decided that the world could not exist without you." I'll say it again. "The day you were born was the day God decided that the world could not exist without you." It's quite nice. I would have been helped in my thinking, though, had the very next quote next to it not been, "You come from dust, you will return to dust. That's why I don't dust. It could be someone I know." But dusting aside, these last 2 months have been profoundly difficult for us because we're just not made to be like this. We're not virtual, we're physical. We relate to one another, to our world, physically. Zoom is fine tonight, wasn't on Sunday. Microsoft Teams is fine. Isn't it fun to do what I did on Monday and go to the Louvre and look at the Mona Lisa without having to queue for 2 hours? Except it wasn't the Mona Lisa, not really. It was an electronic pixelated simulacrum of the Mona Lisa. It wasn't real. And while I am real, honestly, sitting here at my desk just over a mile away from college, what you are seeing of me, hearing of me, noting of me, it's not real. It's a simulation, a virtual image of the person who is truly real. Human beings can do virtual, of course, we're doing it right now. But let's not dare call this virtual reality. The reality is that we are created for relationship. And Christians like me at this point will want to talk about doctrine, specifically the doctrine of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, a doctrine which asserts that God is relationship. If we are made, then, in God's image, it's no wonder that social distancing is getting us down. If we choose to be alone, that's one thing. If we're forced to be alone, that's something else entirely. One of my distinguished predecessors as vicar of the University Church, Michael Main, was struck by myalgic encephalomyelitis, ME, in his last year in Cambridge. Quoting John Donne, he writes in his marvellous book, A Year Lost and Found, "As sickness is the greatest misery, so the greatest misery of sickness is solitude. Solitude is a torment which is not threatened in hell itself." Michael then goes on to comment about being ill and alone. He says, "You feel cut off. You do need reassuring. And the best and most effective way of achieving both is by touch and prayer. I believe that most of us, when we are sick, need physical contact and the spoken assurance of God's love." And as I read those words again recently, I found my heart missing a beat as I remembered the cruel stories of COVID-related deaths where physical touch was prohibited. Just a few weeks ago, a friend of mine had to watch her father die without being able to hold his hand, unable to kiss him one last time, her face shielded by a plastic visor, not even able to share her loving smile behind the surgical mask. This isn't how it's meant to be. And on a lesser scale than the cruelty of these deaths, repeated tens of thousands of times, are the smaller daily deaths which affect us through what we have all come to know in a neologism that would no doubt set Giles Corran off again on his murderous course. I speak inevitably of social distancing. Now, I don't tonight want to get into the debate about social distancing insofar as the science of preventing the spread of COVID-19 is concerned, and besides, Dr. Greatrex is better qualified than me on that one, and you can sign up for her lecture in this slot on June the 17th. But for my purposes tonight, in terms of social distancing, I want to argue that the phrase itself is wrong. We discovered early on that the phrase which gives this talk its title, the new normal, was given birth by economists. This phrase, social distancing, has its origins with politicians and civil servants. And I want to suggest that it is the very worst kind of euphemism. For what we are doing at the moment is not social distancing, it's physical distancing. And in fact, physical distancing is the phrase the World Health Organization wishes we were using. Martin Bauer, who's Professor of Social Psychology and Research Methodology at the London School of Economics, says this: "It occurred to me from the beginning that this was an unfortunate choice of language to talk about social distance, when actually what was meant was physical distance. Physical distance is measured in metric meters or centimeters. It's the geographical distance from person A to person B, while social distance is a measure of distance across social boundaries." And he finishes, "In these strange times of the virus, we want clear physical distance, but at the same time, we want people to remain close to each other socially. Now, I would want to argue that social distancing has been all too real in our society for a long time. I don't just mean we've depended too much on social media. That will be another talk for another day. Rather, I mean that we've forgotten as a society how to truly relate to one another. We've been too ready to collude with a socio-political agenda which disregarded groups of society perceived to have nothing worth saying and nothing worth offering. And some, of course, would want to aver that the referendum result was a direct consequence of this. Remember Brexit? You should. We'll be hearing a lot more about it very soon. But it's not as simple as a north-south divide. It is real and up close. According to the Centre for Cities think tank, Cambridge is the most unequal city in the United Kingdom. It's a complicated picture, but simply put, in this city, the gap between the richest and the poorest is bigger than in any other city in Britain. There are more graduates and postgraduates in Cambridge than anywhere else in Britain, and happily, we beat Oxford by miles. And yet, at the same time, we have nearly the largest number of people without any qualifications whatsoever, especially those aged between 50 and 64. Now, if we're looking for definitions of social distancing, I think these have more authenticity for me than whether I'm running 6 feet away from the nice lady walking her dog along the river. In Cambridge last year, 4,500 people used a food bank. That's 4,500 people out of 124,000. Now, how can it possibly be right that in a city that's grown so big, so rich, and so splendid, 4,500 people need a food bank? It's thought that 20% of people in this country live in poverty. 1 in 5. And our beautiful city turns out to be the most unequal of them all. I've got the latest newsletter from Winter Comfort just here on my desk. Do you know about Winter Comfort? It's about half a mile from Lucy. Last Saturday and Sunday, Winter Comfort fed 105 of the homeless of our city. And that wasn't all of them. 105 fellow human beings. Now, here in Cambridge, alongside Winter Comfort, there's Jimmy's, and the Cambridge Church's Homelessness Project, and the student-led Cambridge Homeless Outreach Programme. These are great organisations. But why, in 2020, are they necessary? Are they not indicative of the consequences of a truly socially distanced society? And this is the reality for too many. And if it was real before the pandemic, what will it become as we continue to live as we are, which may be many months, many years yet? Alienation and estrangement between individuals and their environment has been widely identified and interpreted by philosophers and sociologists for 2 centuries now, at least. Now, few who know me would have me down for a Marxist, but unless and until we recognize that many today experience an economic and political system that is working against them and not for them, then social distancing, real social distancing, is going to be a scourge of our society long after COVID-19 has completed its hideous work. This is all an uneven road for sure. But what of a new destination for our new normal? What would make our hearts rejoice to find in a new ordinary, a new usual, a new same as would be expected? Now, being a priest, you won't be surprised, at least I hope you won't be surprised, that I think God is involved in a new normal. Now, this isn't a creedal talk, and certainly not a sermon, but no follower of Jesus could ignore his teaching, because the gospel is the very opposite of social distancing. In the gospel, we're told that Jesus touched people and healed them, sure, but more than that, the gospel offers a wholeness and a healing which is socially transformative. The Croatian theologian Miroslav Volf once summarized it like this: all humans and all life on the planet are interdependent, an interconnected ecology of relatedness. For one person to truly flourish, the entire world must flourish. For the world to truly flourish, every person in it must flourish. And for every person and the entire world to truly flourish, each in their own way and all together must live and see themselves as living in the presence of the life-giving God. Now, whether you sign up to that or not, whether you're a person of faith or not, I'm not worried right now. But I hope that you can say the creed of a new destination, a way of being that can be usual and ordinary, not because it's the exception, but because it's the rule. A human society that is not physically distanced because it need not be. A human society that is not socially distanced because it knows it must not be. For we can never live virtually, we can only live together. To do that, we cannot live for ourselves alone. We can only live for one another. Granted, that last bit does sound a little like a sermon, sorry, but I'll live with that if it can help to point the way to a new destination. It may take a while to get there, but when we do, we might even dare to call it the new normal. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. That was an absolutely lovely talk with lots of thought-inspiring ideas in it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask all the members of the audience to submit their questions via the chat function. And I can see that there's probably some questions there already. Maybe these are just comments. If you could submit your questions through chat, and then what I will do is I will just give you the floor, every individual person who has asked a question. I hope that's all right. And whilst you do that, maybe I can ask a little question, Adrian. So you're hoping for a new destination. Do you think that, you know, a lot of people have said that currently there is more of a sense of community possibly, or of being, or camaraderie, or of being helpful to each other beyond what we have felt was the normal. Do you think that will last and that will help to get us to a new destination?
I'd like to think so. I don't know what others think. I think I've noticed over the last 2 months, in many ways, my experience of Cambridge is that Cambridge has been a nicer place. Cambridge is a lovely place. Goodness me. And in your introduction, Henriette, you mentioned some of the places where I've worked in the past, and they've been quite rough. And for most of my ministry, I've been in the industrial West Midlands and in areas of significant deprivation. But I noticed at the start, people being very twitchy indeed when we were all trying to do the 2 meter thing, and in other ways. And I've watched people become much more relaxed about that. That's a tiny, and perhaps trivial example. The more significant things have been these amazing acts of kindness and generosity and courage that we've all been observing. And some of that, of course, has been tragic, especially as we've heard more and more about frontline health service workers themselves contracting the virus. And these alarming new statistics discovering that BAME people and people who are in ethnic minorities have been more likely to get it, and the lack of PPE and all of that stuff has been deeply concerning. But the heroism and the courage that's been exhibited has been amazing. So I would hope that as we emerge, and I hope we will emerge from this crisis, the things we've learned about generosity and kindness and seeking the other are things that will stay with us. I would love to believe that will be the case. I truly would.
Okay, thank you. Okay, first person to ask a question is someone with the Cambridge ID JCB78. So can I invite them to switch their microphone on and ask the question or give the comment?
Hi, it's Jackie here, Henriette. I'm sorry I altered my identification. That was a really nice talk, Adrian, and I really enjoyed it. I don't live in Cambridge. I live just outside Cambridge. I'm incredibly lucky. I live in a rural setting. And what we've noticed in our village is not only are we connecting with people that we didn't even know existed before, but everybody seems to be more connecting with the world around them. So I don't know whether it's just because I'm sat at home that I've heard the cuckoo every day since the beginning of May, or whether it almost feels as though there's a universal reawakening that isn't just limited to people. And I wondered what your thoughts were on this sort of expansion of consciousness, if you like.
Wow, thank you so much. It sounds lovely where you live. And like you, I only live a mile from Lucy, at 1.2 miles from Great St Mary's, but I live on the river. And so like you, I have there's a lot of, we hear the cars and the traffic, but of course we're hearing lots of other things as well. And if that interconnectedness of which you speak can expand into a new eye for the goodness of what we've been given in creation. I'm not making a religious point here, but I'm making a general point about our apprehension of what we've got in the wonder of creation. I think that would be a wonderful thing, a real lesson to learn. I guess we're all aware, aren't we, that the impact of the virus has had a knock-on effect on all sorts of other things that are having, it's dangerous language this, but are having some kind of healing of our earth in other ways. I read last week, and I'm absolutely totally a non-expert in this, that the hole in the ozone layer has sealed up. And there will be scientists in the university who can explain that to me. I don't understand it, but I do know that it's good. And I do know that people are telling me who are used to coughing and spluttering in streets that they're not coughing and spluttering, ironically, in streets anymore because there's less traffic, though I notice it's building up and so on. the learning to appreciate the small things and the big things in the world around us. Yes, that interconnectedness, that will be a wonderful result of this experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. We have a comment from Monica Waters. Monica, do you want to unmute yourself? Monica? Okay. Monica, I'll move on to Suzanne Doyle Morris. And then when you find a possibility to unmute, I'll give you the floor, okay?
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, Adrian. I really enjoyed that. And I wanted to first commend and thank Lucy for doing this kind of Zoom outreach, if you will, to people in the community, because I was very happy at Lucy, you know, for many years right after the millennium, but I moved away and now I live in Scotland and it gets really difficult to get to Lucy for anything. So I want to thank you for hosting these. I guess my query was around optimism versus pessimism. I like to think of myself, as I can see that Monica does as well, as general optimist, but then other things do concern me around this. For example, the way we are seeing evidence of expanding inequalities around socioeconomic groups, but also even the way big data companies are starting to use this as a placeholder to grab more and more access to personal data under the guise of doing well by all of us, which in theory sounds great, but actually was something they've been trying to do for many years. And this is giving them a perfect Trojan horse, which worries me about society as well. So maybe a bit of a big question, and I'm sure everybody has their own opinion on this, but I swear I feel like I veer now at the moment between pessimism, I should say, and optimism. So any insights into that I would be really grateful for.
Wow, thank you. Yes, we're doing it now, aren't we? I mean, we've walked into this is where they'll come and get me, the Zoom trap, because like all of you, I guess, when I signed up for this, I told them all sorts of things about myself in order that I could use it. And my friend Sir Nigel Shadbolt, who's principal of Jesus College, Oxford, founded the Big Data Institute. And has been commenting recently about this, and it's worth giving more information about yourself to a search engine and looking for Nigel and finding out about that. He will always have good things to say. I heartily recommend his book, The Digital Ape. Nigel Shadbolt, The Digital Ape. Well worth a read, and your eyes will be wide open. In terms of optimism and pessimism, I think, forgive me, the dog collar shows itself now. I think I'm very clear about hope as a concept, which is not the same as optimism, in the sense that, you know, the kind of the longing for something. I wish I'd love to win the lottery, or I'd love the weather to stay like this, or I'd love the virus to go away. Hope has a different quality to optimism, and it combines with a number of other concepts in a kind of Christian theological way, and we won't get into all of that now. But if I was back in Great St Mary's, I would want to not sort of go into optimism versus pessimism and so on, but I would want to talk about hope. And we could carry on that conversation for a long time. I think it all ties in with some of the things we've heard and some of the comments we've read about learning lessons. And we're all historians to an extent. And we have to be willing and ready as a society, I think, to learn lessons from this in the short, medium and long term, this crisis that's happened to us. Cambridge has done plague before, many times, and Great St Mary's has been involved with it many times. But we have in Cambridge, and Suzanne, you'll probably remember Hobson's conduit, you know, running down the water, and that was a lesson learned from the plague. Having fresh water in the city, you know, there's a practical thing that's sort of living in the middle of our history. That's just a sort of good thing to know. In our own context, in our new world, there will be a whole host of other things that we need to learn about ourselves and our society from this. And I think it's on every level. It's about basic human interaction. It's about service of others. It's about looking to the needs of others, but also the huge questions you raise about, you know, about our global society, about our interconnectedness through this medium and through many others, and the colossal lessons we have to learn about caring for our planet. So sorry, it's a bit of a rambling response, but I do think what you identify so well is the interconnectedness of it all. But we have to learn the lessons. We must learn the lessons, and politicians and civic leaders and the church leaders and many others and academics too have to be at the forefront of not only learning the lessons, but then putting them into practice.
Monica, did you want to take the floor now? If so, just go ahead.
I agree with what Monica said, by the way.
Okay, you can see the comments. Okay. Yeah. So, sorry, Monica, we do not seem to be able to hear you, so I'm going to pass on to Helen. Helen, did you have a question that you wanted to ask? Helen? No?
I can read it out if that helps.
Yeah, shall we do that?
Hi, Helen, if you're with us. I can see your question, which says, I wonder what you would suggest we call new normal instead. Good question. A religious, a Christian, I beg your pardon, a Christian would want to talk about the kingdom of God, which isn't a place but a state of existence and being. And that is definitely something to hope for, because that's the great reversal. That's when the Magnificat Mary song is put into practice. But I promised this wouldn't be a sermon, so we'll veer away from sermonizing. What would you call the new normal? I hope we just call it life. We'll just be life as we want it to be, in all the ways that we're good at expressing and want to believe in, the best of people, and people striving for the needs of others. And I think recognizing the humanity of others. I mean, one of the things that gets me is really hard is this discovery of the inequality that we find in the heart of our city. It's not something that I knew of before I came. It's something I've had to learn, and it's something that's a difficult lesson, and there are no easy answers to. I got very close to Nigel Gawthrop, who was mayor of Cambridge when I arrived, and he died in a tragic scuba diving accident at the beginning of 2019. And he's a great man, and he had marvelous red braces and red shoes, and he was a very well-known figure in Cambridge. When I first went to meet him, I said, "What would you like me to do?" And he looked at me and said, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that." And he thought for a moment, and he looked at me and said, "I want you to build bridges. I want you to build bridges." And that was a terrifying charge. And when I preached at his funeral, I pointed out that we are in a city full of bridges, but we need different kinds of bridges in our community. and in our city, and it needs to spread out from here. So let's hope that a new normal could simply be called life, but life as we truly want it to be lived.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Claire, did you want to ask a question? Or would you like me to read out your question?
I'd like to ask 2 questions.
Oh, hello.
Well, the first one's a bit trivial. You might have seen it. I said, Adrian, do you really go running? That was quite a surprise. But anyway, that's just being nosy. The other question was about church. You know, maybe we'll ditch meeting in buildings. Maybe the church could change in some radical way. You know, what in some blue sky thinking about what the church might be in the future. How might this affect what we do as church being a community rather than a building?
Thank you, Claire, very much. The first thing to say is Claire's my friend, so she's being very cheeky asking about running, and I am running and getting, this is from a 0 start, and so yes, we're up to 4 miles a day now. So thank you for the thumbs up, I appreciate it. Your question about church is a fascinating one. One of the sort of really intriguing things that's emerged in sort of social media and letters pages in the broadsheets and so on has been about church buildings being closed at this time, and the security that lots of people have found in familiar space, and space that is dedicated, set apart, sacred in whatever sense, and that's an interesting one. The new Archbishop of York wrote quite a pertinent piece as a follow-up to that, saying the church hasn't closed, you know, has never closed. The church is a body, and I've been writing about that over the last 2 months to Great St Mary's and on our social media and blogging and so on and so forth. Church buildings can be an albatross around our necks. But church buildings matter to many, many people. So it's a complicated question. I think we will always need spaces within which to gather and worship. And we could have a long conversation about cathedrals and churches and other places of worship too. I mean, when I went into the amazing new mosque for the first time, I was just blown away. It feels incredible, and it is beautiful. And I was scratching my head saying, what does it, I know this feeling, I know this sensation, and of course I do. It's what I feel when I'm in Great St Mary's. So yes, the church needs to think about buildings because they cost money, but I think they're important, and I think they can become useful. I mean, certainly the churches around Cambridge at the moment are being used as collection centres for food banks, are being used iconically in all sorts of other ways. As you know, Great St Mary's and many other churches are physical night shelters for the homeless for much of the year. So there is something important, I think, about buildings which we mustn't lose, but at the same time we must learn that, you know, if some totalitarian regime banned all church buildings tomorrow, the church, the body of Christ, would continue. That's a very Anglican middle way answer to your question, but you probably expect that from me.
Certainly. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I've got Jane Nixon, who has a comment or a question.
Yes, I have, thank you. Not many of you will know me. I'm actually a 78 veterinary graduate, and there are very few veterinary graduates from Lucy. I have to say it was probably one of the happiest times of my life. I lived with half a dozen other vets and we had a whale of a time. Now, I'm an equine vet and I'm passionate about communication and cooperation within the profession and paraprofessionals, and it's been rather an uphill struggle. However, to my amazement, 2 weeks ago, just before some easement of lockdown, we produced a webinar on the production of the young horse, which is very important for horses going to the Olympic Games, etc. And those were myself and 3 other paraprofessionals, and we were astounded. We had almost 500 attendees all over the world, 85 questions, which we couldn't answer. We had to do a rerun. Now, this was, I think, because people were in lockdown and they were bored and they thought this was quite an interesting subject. My question, please, Adrian, and this has been a most useful discussion for me, is how can we maintain this at the professional level, on the paraprofessional level? It's extremely difficult. I've spent 40 years trying to do it, and this is the first time I've achieved it. I'd be very grateful for your or anyone else's advice as how we can take this forward, please.
Wow, thank you very much. It's lovely to see you, and I'm thrilled, Jane, that Lucy was at their happiest time. I hope you don't mind the fact that these blokes have started appearing in your alma mater, and your wonderful work as an equine vet. Wow, it's such a big question. There are friends of mine who are professionals in other professions who have a very similar story to yours, actually. And saying that there's a new kind of connecting has been made available all of a sudden. It was always there, of course, but because of where we found ourselves, it's being used more creatively. So I think that needs capturing by professional bodies and events like this. And I'm attending lectures of organisations in London and elsewhere that I would never have got on a train to go to, but is wonderful to come online and be part of, and hear and interact with. So I think it's incumbent on professional institutions to catch hold of this, whatever happens in the future. There remains that challenge, though, I think, Jane, about our interconnecting on a physical and emotional level. I mean, I can see you there. And you look like the kind of person I'd really enjoy sitting down, having a drink with, and having goss next time you come back to Lucy. And I hope there'll be a chance when you do that. And right now, I can't do that in the same way because of you being there. So I think there are levels on which this kind of connectedness can be a really useful tool. And professional organisations and others should exploit that. But what I wouldn't want us to lose is the joy, the humanity that comes from the physical presence with people. What we learn about the essence of one another and the soul and so on. So I don't think they exclude one another. I think that it's very much a both and. You'll have discovered in these questions why I'm an Anglican, because I always manage to see both sides of an argument, and I tend to tread a middle way. But I'm inspired by Robert Runcie, a former Archbishop of Canterbury, who back in the day was Dean of Trinity Hall, and Robert Runcie said, because he was of course Archbishop during the time that Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, and he said, my problem is I can see both sides of an argument. I thought that meant I was sophisticated, but she tells me that I'm a wet. So there we are. But I can see both sides in this, and I think the answer is a both and answer. So people like you and me, to ensure that our professional bodies and others don't let go of what we've learned in this.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Jane, for the question. We have one more question from Jacob Anamalai. Jacob, do you want to come online, or shall I read out the question?
Yeah, you can read out the question. That's fine.
No, you can. We can hear you, so you go ahead.
Yeah. I am from India, Jacob. I am from India. Very interesting talk and very thought-provoking. Well, Reverend Adrian, would you like to give your opinion on what will ultimately lead to the social distancing or the new normal? Maybe a social deprivation or a social imbalances. You know, right now in India, we see a lot of things happening. People are losing jobs. People are losing their societal status. We don't know whether they'll get it back. So what is, in your opinion, ultimately what this social distancing or new normal will ultimately lead to? The society to?
Jacob, thank you so much. It's lovely to know you've joined us from India. It's just amazing. And I'm grateful for your company and for your question. I've been reading in the British press some of what's going on in India at the moment. And you help us all by giving us a global perspective on this, and you raise our horizons to recognize that what we're talking about isn't just an issue for this city or for this country, but it's a worldwide situation. In this country, Jacob, the Archbishop of Canterbury has been speaking recently. It's been Mental Health Awareness Week, and that's an aspect, of course, of lockdown on which we could talk a great deal. And in his I can see you. Hi, Jacob. And in the comments that he makes, he has hoped and strongly said that there must not be austerity. And I've got a quotation from him here. And he says, you know, we won't be able to do this with austerity. We won't do it with class fighting. We'll only do it with community and the common good. We shouldn't be afraid to spend money that will produce a better society. Well, I would want to ally myself with those remarks. And of course, some people will be very anxious. We were told in this country, Jacob, by a previous Prime Minister that there was no magic money tree. They were all noting all of a sudden that a colossal amount of money has been produced from somewhere to enable the right things to happen. So there are big questions for society and for economists on how money is distributed well and wisely in order that we emerge through this, as the Archbishop says, with community and the common good at the forefront. There will always be problems. There will always be imbalances in society. I myself come from, for what it's worth, a poor background, from a single parent family. We grew up living in council accommodation and on benefits. I was the first person in my family to actually earn a salary for more than 2 generations. So I am passionate about a society where we do all we can to strive for the common good, to strive for the best for all people. There will always be problems with that. There will always be issues. There will always be people who can't be helped, who won't be helped. But nevertheless, we need to have the goal and the ambition and the hope that that's what we'll be able to work for.
Thank you. Let's hope that the revival comes up.
Let's hope.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. It's good to see you there.
Yeah, thank you.
And perhaps and someone else in your house. It's lovely to see her too.
Yeah, that's my wife.
Well, nice to see your wife, and greetings to India. Hello. Lovely to see you there.
Yeah. It's late night here, around 11 p.m. in India.
Right. Right. Well, thank you for staying up so late.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure joining you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think it's probably time to wrap this up, Adrian, and all of you in the audience. And maybe it was very good to finish with a question all the way from India, just showing how much we can get socially closer even if we are physically very distant. So I'm going to say thank you once again to Adrian for a lovely talk and for a wonderful discussion. Adrian, you might want to have a look at all the comments in chat, lots of them very, you know, happy for the comments that you've given and all the information. So thanks once again. And maybe those of you who know how to show an applause can do this now, and then we'll finish today's talk with that. So thank you very much, Adrian, and thank you to all of you in the audience. Bye.